The civil rights movement during the 1960s, of course, was a very serious movement. What you see on your screen here is a Greyhound bus near Anniston, Alabama. And it was a bus set on fire by the Klan because the Greyhound Company had dared to allow white and black uh, people on the same bus. It was a very vicious thing. Um, the attempt obviously was to kill everybody inside, and they came damn close to doing so. The Alabama state troopers do not always get a good rap, and you know, but they were the ones who saved the people on this bus. Even this was even too much for them, and it was just a terrible thing. These are called freedom riders, and these were folks who essentially took a series of buses across the South. And once you enter the South, black and white are supposed to be in different buses, or certainly sharply separated if they were on a bus. Uh, this particular atrocity shocked the nation. I remember seeing pictures of it on television, and I was in my mid-teens at this time. So have made a statement about damn near cost them their lives. The in Greensboro, North Carolina, you have the lunch counter sit-ins, and you can see here what's happening. There's these young people, uh, white and black, would sit down and say, "I'd like to have a Coke and a hamburger," and the lady behind the counter would say, "The colored section is over there." And no, we just want a Coke and a hamburger. What's wrong with that? Can I have a Coke and a hamburger? I'll go over there. And and of course, some places or some places like this, you weren't allowed in if you were black. If you were black, you weren't allowed in at all. And you can see here, of course, that this is a crowd that's gathering. They've already smeared something in her hair. Um, this young man here, it looks to me as though he's about to pour something. I can't tell you what it is on top of her head. Again, right here, this guy, God knows what he's got on him. White guy. I remember correctly, he was the son of a minister. Um, but this got ugly. They're going to get pulled off of these stools and kind of dragged out. And but again, one of the big things, and just as I saw the Anniston bus incident, from the safety of my home, um, I saw this. And of course, the nation was shocked by this because most people just didn't get what the apartheid rule in the South was like. And North Carolina was actually a fairly benevolent state, if that's the right term. Moderate state, I don't know that moderate is even correct there, compared to, say, South Carolina or Alabama, places like that. And it was very rough. And, these folks had immense courage to do that. Nevertheless, a lot of people are going to end up dead in this thing. The, um, the basis of this, the way in which you could keep this rule, this apartheid rule, the way in which you could keep these strict social divisions and racial divisions and all that in the South was based on the fact that only some people could vote. Now, the 15th Amendment is pretty clear about this. Everybody gets the right to vote. So states, I don't know what state we're in here, but these states would say, okay, well, anybody can vote so long as they pass a literacy test to prove that they are capable of casting an intelligent vote. And so a white person would walk in and they'd say, who's the president of the United States? What state do you live in? What was the name of the document that was signed on July 4th, 1776, or something like that. You know. black person walking in, and they say, so the 13th clause of Magna Carta means what? There's a very grim joke about this. It's not funny at all. But a very well educated black man walks in, and clerk asks him a very, very tough question. He answers it just like that. Second question, bang, just like that. Another great answer to a very tough question. Finally, in desperation, the clerk reaches under the table and pulls out this Chinese newspaper and says, "Can you tell me what this says?" And the man says, "Well, I can't make it all out, but I can kind of get the gist of this." And the clerk, of course, goes back and says, "You can?" And he says, "This is one black man who's not voting here this year." And that's pretty much what it was like. It was grim and it was brutal. Uh, Lynchings were rather common. I would put up a picture of a lynched body, except for the fact that I really don't want to essentially, well, first off, I don't get thrown off YouTube, but second off, I don't know that you particularly you can imagine what somebody who's beaten badly and hung looks like. So but that's what it's like. And I think I said in an earlier broadcast, my mother and I accidentally drove into a Klan rally, and it's pretty rough. And it's hard to imagine people living under those circumstances. Um, and of course, they did and had for 100 years. So you can look at this here. You can see regarding the test, the literacy test, Fortenberry, who probably is the registrar of votes, the test must go. And do we have a constitution? Um, and back here, it's going to say one man, one vote. Um, these were the demands were simple and clear, and of course quite appropriate. Which is, if you're a citizen of the United States, you should have the right to vote unless there's some other horrible mitigating circumstance. And so, and of course, your vote should only be taken away from you by due process, and so it's simply because you've got the wrong skin color. Well, it was tough, and as I say, a good many people died. I remember these things very well. Dr. King, of course, uh, addressing in Washington, Washington Monument in the background there, his "I Have a Dream" speech. Well, certainly one of the most famous speeches in American history, um, and you really a milestone in American history. The "I Have a Dream" speech, um, and you know, again, shown on TV everywhere. But people by this time had just, if you were going to be for segregation, you were digging in. You were going to be for segregation, and if you're for integration, you're going to be for integration. And people who believed in integration, who went south to help integrate the South, some of them ended up dead. And certainly a lot of them ended up beaten. I'm not going to go through all the horrible things that happened in this time period. But of course, many horrible things did happen. I don't think I have time to go through all that went wrong. This is called Bloody Sunday. These folks were walking from Selma, Alabama, to Montgomery, Alabama, to essentially bring pressure upon the state government of Alabama to allow fair voting. And it didn't. It turned into, you can see the Alabama state troopers beating these guys to. I don't know that anybody was beaten to death, but some were beaten close to death. Um, and it turned into just a brawl, one-sided, very one-sided. which landed on TV everywhere. And again, once again, TV is carrying the message. And when people saw this, as I did, you were simply horrified by what was going on. People would say, like, is this the United States? And the answer is, well, it's part of the United States, and some of the attitudes are pretty widespread. And it caused, in many ways, a searching reassessment of exactly what it meant to be an American and what one American owed another. Um, it's going to be passed. Things are going to be passed to try to make this right, but it's still going to be very tough. And so we end up with the civil rights legislation, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which said that accommodations, public facilities, school, issues of race, religion, gender. The Civil Rights Act basically said that if you agree to open a public business, then by God, you're open to the public. If you take a government license to open your business, by God, it's open to the public. Basically, that's what the Civil Rights Act says. It took a long time. I don't care what the research shows. It took a long time for the Civil Rights Act to be effective. And there are too many ways to evade these things. The 1965 Voting Rights Act was a very powerful act. It only applied to certain parts of the country, and that was one of its weaknesses. But it was not always very clear. And so at first, this did help change things immediately. City councils and county commissioners and all that, you begin to get some racial balance, or at least a movement toward racial balance. But that's simply over the long run, the Voting Rights Act has been supplanted by the Supreme Court. It has been replaced, at least cut back by the Supreme Court. But very quickly, I mean, this was a very enforceable act. You don't have to worry about going into different hotels and motels and trying to decide whether or not they're engaged in segregation or not. Voting Rights Act, you got a right to vote. That can be enforced. The weaknesses of the voting, and it does have an immediate impact, but the weakness of the Voting Act, of course, is that it only applies to a few places. And it's so the two acts kind of balance each other, and in the long run, they did improve the civil rights of minority Americans, and particularly in the South and in the Southwest. But in the long run, the Voting Rights Act is not as enforceable as you might think it would be. And in the long run, the Civil Rights Act became more and more and more powerful as precedents were accumulated in the courts, in particular, to enforce this. So these are the two big acts that come out of the Civil Rights era, and important, very important almost beyond words. And one of the best things, of course, that the American Congress has ever done. So anyway, I know this is a grim little lecture here, and I could have made it a lot grimmer. Everybody out there, stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to talk to you again very soon.